The examination room was supposed to be a place of calm professionalism, but the air grew thick with unease as Mr. Rabbit leaned back on the medical bed, his piercing eyes fixed on the doctor. "How are you feeling, Mr. Rabbit?" I asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone. His lips curled into a sly grin, and he began weaving an unsettling narrative about fairy tales, princes waking princesses, kisses breaking spells. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on me. Was this some twisted metaphor for his condition, or was he simply testing boundaries? "Details," he muttered dismissively when I corrected him about the roles of princes and princesses. His voice carried an undertone that sent chills down my spine. It felt less like a consultation and more like a psychological game, one where I was dangerously unprepared. Each word dripped with double meaning, leaving me unsure whether to laugh off his remarks or call security. But there was no room for error here. Mr. Rabbit wasn't just any patient. He was a philanthropist whose donations kept the hospital afloat. My frustration simmered beneath the surface, masked by a forced smile. As he continued to ramble about kisses and awakenings, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked behind his words. This wasn't merely strange. It was calculated. Every pause, every smirk seemed designed to throw me off balance. And yet I had to tread carefully. Losing my composure could mean losing not only this patient, but also jeopardizing the entire facility's reputation. Little did I know, this bizarre encounter would set the stage for far greater conflicts ahead. The examination room, once a sanctuary of sterile professionalism, now felt like a battleground. Mr. Rabbit reclined on the medical bed, his piercing gaze fixed on Miss Palmer as she hesitantly approached him at my direction. "Let me see where it hurts," I said, attempting to steer the conversation back to clinical matters. With a sly grin, Mr. Rabbit pointed vaguely at his abdomen, but his demeanor shifted when Miss Palmer leaned closer to examine him. "Lower," he murmured, his voice dripping with insinuation. Miss Palmer hesitated, her hands hovering uncertainly over his torso. "A little more help from you, and everything will be fine," he added, his tone laced with double meaning. The air grew heavy with tension. His words weren't just inappropriate, they were calculated, almost predatory. My instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. Miss Palmer froze. Her face pale, she took a step back, visibly shaken. "I don't think this is necessary," she stammered, her voice trembling. I intervened immediately, stepping between them. "Mr. Rabbit, please focus on your condition," I said firmly. But he merely chuckled, dismissing my authority with a wave of his hand. It wasn't just his behavior, it was the way he carried himself, as if he believed he was untouchable. Unbeknownst to any of us, a small recording device hidden in the corner of the room had been activated. Every word, every unsettling remark was being captured. This would later become the cornerstone of the accusations against him, though none of us realized it at the time. For now, the situation felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. As the tension escalated, Mrs. Rabbit's earlier warnings echoed in my mind. "He's not an ordinary patient," she had said. Now I understood why. Mr. Rabbit wasn't here for medical care. He was playing a dangerous game, testing boundaries and exploiting vulnerabilities. His casual mention of needing help wasn't about his health. It was a thinly veiled attempt to manipulate Miss Palmer. When Miss Palmer finally stepped away, tears welled up in her eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered to me, her voice breaking. I nodded, understanding her distress. "Go. I'll handle this," I reassured her. though I wasn't sure how much longer I could endure his antics myself. As she left the room, Mr. Rabbit smirked, clearly pleased with the chaos he had caused. But the real storm was yet to come. When Albert entered moments later, his expression darkened up at seeing Miss Palmer's distraught state. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice sharp with concern. Before I could respond, Mr. Rabbit interjected, feigning innocence. "Just a harmless checkup," he said smoothly, his tone mocking. Albert's jaw tightened, and I could see the fury building behind his eyes. This was no longer just a medical consultation. It was a clash of wills, a prelude to the larger conflict brewing beneath the surface. And as the recorder continued to capture every moment, none of us realized the extent to which this encounter would shape our fates in the days to come. The tension in the hospital had reached its boiling point, but nothing could have prepared us for what happened next. Miss Palmer, visibly shaken from earlier encounters with Mr. Rabbit, found herself cornered once again, this time in a private examination room. As she attempted to leave after politely excusing herself, Mr. Rabbit's demeanor shifted from unsettling charm to outright aggression. With a swift motion, he locked the door behind her, his smirk widening as panic flickered across her face. "Why are you running away?" he asked mockingly, stepping closer. "We're just having some fun." His voice was low and menacing now, devoid of any pretense of civility. Before she could react, he reached out, his hand brushing against her arm in a way that made her recoil instinctively. The air grew thick with dread as Miss Palmer pressed herself against the wall, her eyes darting toward the door. "Let me go," she pleaded, her voice trembling, but Mr. Rabbit only laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the confined space. Unbeknownst to either of them, Mrs. Rabbit had arrived at the hospital moments earlier, seeking answers about her husband's peculiar behavior. Drawn by the muffled sounds coming from the locked room, she approached cautiously, her suspicions mounting with every step. Peering through the narrow window on the door, she witnessed the scene unfolding inside. Her husband standing too close to Miss Palmer, the young woman visibly terrified and trapped. For a fleeting moment, Mrs. Rabbit hesitated, torn between disbelief and rage. Was this truly happening? Or was it part of some elaborate scheme orchestrated by someone else? Just as the situation seemed irredeemable, Albert burst onto the scene, his instincts sharp and unyielding. Spotting the locked door and hearing Miss Palmer's faint cries, he acted without hesitation. Summoning all his strength, he rammed his shoulder into the door, splintering the frame with a deafening crack. The sudden intrusion sent shockwaves through the room. Mr. Rabbit stumbled back, caught off guard, while Miss Palmer collapsed into tears, gasping for breath. Albert's arrival transformed chaos into confrontation. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting like a blade. Mr. Rabbit regained his composure quickly, masking his guilt with feigned indignation. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, glaring at Albert. "She started it." Miss Palmer shook her head vehemently, unable to speak through her sobs. Meanwhile, Mrs. Rabbit pushed past Albert, her expression unreadable but brimming with fury. "Explain yourselves," she commanded, her tone icy enough to freeze fire. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the accusation hung heavy in the air, compounded by the uncertainty of who held the moral high ground. Had Mr. Rabbit crossed an unforgivable line, or was this an orchestrated attempt to tarnish his reputation? Either way, the stakes were higher than ever before. Mrs. Rabbit's entrance into the unfolding drama was nothing short of theatrical. Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, her presence commanded attention the moment she stepped into the room. Her sharp eyes scanned the scene before her. Albert standing defensively near the door, Miss Palmer visibly shaken in the corner, and her husband, Mr. Rabbit, attempting to feign innocence. The tension was palpable, thick enough to slice through with a scalpel. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her voice icy and deliberate, each syllable landing like a dagger. Albert instinctively straightened his posture, trying to match her steely demeanor. "Mrs. Rabbit," he began cautiously, "your husband has been harassing Miss Palmer. His behavior is unacceptable." Mrs. Rabbit raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by his boldness. She turned toward her husband, who shrugged nonchalantly as if to say, "What can you do?" Dismissing him for now, she refocused on Albert. "You accuse my husband without proof?" she asked, her tone laced with menace. "Do you understand what happens when someone makes baseless accusations against powerful people?" She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the tiled floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. "My family's influence spans industries, politics, and institutions, including this hospital. If I wanted, I could have you removed from your position within hours." Albert swallowed hard but refused to back down. "I'm not afraid of consequences if it means exposing the truth," he replied firmly. Mrs. Rabbit smirked, clearly intrigued by his audacity. "Truth?" she echoed mockingly. "And where exactly is your evidence? Words are cheap, Dr. Abowski, or should I call you Albert?" At that moment, Albert realized she knew far more than she let on. Unbeknownst to either of them, Mrs. Rabbit had already discovered the secret recording device hidden in the examination room. Earlier, while investigating her husband's erratic behavior, she stumbled upon the audio file. A damning record of every inappropriate comment, every predatory advance. Yet instead of exposing it immediately, she chose to keep it close, using it as leverage to test Albert's resolve. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a chilling whisper. "Let me make one thing clear. You're playing a dangerous game, young man. Cross us again without concrete evidence, and you'll regret it. But—" she paused, studying him intently. "If you play your cards right, there might be something in it for you." The implication hung heavily in the air. Was she offering him a deal? Or merely toying with him? Before Albert could respond, Mrs. Rabbit turned on her heel, her movements fluid and calculated. "Think carefully about your next move," she said over her shoulder before disappearing down the corridor. The hospital's corridors, once a place of quiet efficiency, now buzzed with whispered rumors about the crumbling healthcare system. It wasn't just outdated equipment or inefficient protocols. There were whispers of corruption so deep that even the most seasoned staff hesitated to speak openly. At the center of it all was Jonathan Abowski, the newly appointed health minister, whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Rumors swirled that he had ties to major bribery schemes involving pharmaceutical companies and hospital management contracts. For Albert, this revelation hit uncomfortably close to home. Though he denied any familial connection to Abowski, the mere association through their shared surname made him a target for suspicion. Albert found himself trapped in an impossible dilemma. On one side stood justice, a chance to expose Mr. Rabbit's predatory behavior and hold powerful figures accountable. On the other side loomed the shadow of his own family legacy, tainted by allegations against someone who bore the same last name. If I push too hard, Albert thought bitterly, they'll use Abowski's scandals to discredit me. He could already imagine the headlines. Another Abowski scandal rocks healthcare system. The pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders as he tried to navigate the treacherous waters of morality and self-preservation. Meanwhile, Donald Wright, the beleaguered hospital director, faced mounting pressure from both ends. Mrs. Rabbit had made her position clear. If Albert wasn't removed, she would pull her family's funding, crippling the hospital financially. Yet at the same time, whispers reached Wright's ears that Jonathan Abowski might take personal interest in how Albert was treated. If Wright mishandled the situation, it could mean political suicide. Donald paced his office late into the night, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Should he sacrifice Albert to appease the rabbits? Doing so would eliminate the immediate threat, but risk losing a promising young doctor whose potential could benefit the hospital in the long run. Or should he stand by Albert, risking financial ruin and possible retaliation from higher-ups? His hands trembled as he poured another cup of coffee, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a leaden blanket. In a moment of desperation, Donald summoned Albert to his office. "Listen carefully," he began, his voice low and urgent. "You're walking a tightrope here. Push this issue further, and you'll drag us all down with you. But if you back off..." He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Albert stared back, his expression unreadable. "I didn't start this," Albert finally said, his tone firm. "But I won't walk away until the truth comes out." Unbeknownst to either of them, Mrs. Rabbit had already begun strategizing behind the scenes. She knew of Jonathan Abowski's reputation and saw an opportunity to manipulate the situation to her advantage. By subtly hinting at Albert's supposed connection to the minister, she hoped to sow discord among the hospital staff and weaken Albert's credibility. Her calculating smile betrayed no hint of remorse as she plotted her next move. As tensions escalated, the hospital became a battleground where loyalty, integrity, and survival collided. Every decision carried consequences far beyond what anyone anticipated, leaving Albert, Donald, and Mrs. Rabbit locked in a high-stakes game where no one emerged unscathed. Albert's apology to Mrs. Rabbit was a calculated performance, designed not only to mend fences, but also to position himself strategically in the unfolding drama. Over steaming cups of coffee at a quiet cafe near the hospital, he exuded an air of contrition that seemed almost too perfect. "Here, Miss Rabbit," he began, his tone warm, yet deferential. "I truly regret any misunderstanding earlier today. It wasn't my intention to offend you or your esteemed family." His words dripped with sincerity, though beneath the surface lay a meticulously crafted plan. Mrs. Rabbit, however, was no ordinary adversary. She sipped her cappuccino slowly, her sharp eyes never leaving Albert's face. "Apologies are easy," she replied coolly. "But actions speak louder than words." Her voice carried an edge of warning, daring him to reveal more without directly asking. Sensing her resistance, Albert pressed on cautiously. "Your husband is undoubtedly a remarkable man," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Still, I couldn't help but notice there seems to be some tension between you two lately." The comment hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a moment, Mrs. Rabbit froze, her expression unreadable. Then, with a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes, she leaned back in her chair. "You're quite observant, Dr. Abowski," she murmured. "Or perhaps you've been doing some digging into our private affairs?" Her tone shifted subtly, laced now with suspicion and amusement. Albert felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine but forced himself to maintain composure. "Not at all," he insisted, feigning innocence. "It's just... well, when one works closely with patients, certain patterns become apparent." His attempt to extract information about Mr. Rabbit's behavior, and by extension, Mrs. Rabbit's potential vulnerabilities, was as bold as it was reckless. But what Albert failed to anticipate was Mrs. Rabbit's razor-sharp instincts. Leaning forward slightly, she fixed him with a piercing gaze. "Tell me something, Dr. Abowski," she said softly, her voice dripping with menace. "Do you always pry so deeply into the personal lives of those around you? Or is this particular interest driven by something else?" Before Albert could respond, disaster struck. In his nervousness, he let slip a careless remark about Jonathan Abowski, the health minister. "My uncle always says politics can make strange bedfellows," he joked weakly, immediately realizing his mistake. Mrs. Rabbit's eyebrows shot up. Her curiosity piqued. "Uncle?" she echoed, her tone icy. "So you are related to Jonathan Abowski after all?" Albert stammered, trying to backtrack. No, it's complicated," he fumbled. "We share a surname, but that's where the connection ends." Yet Mrs. Rabbit wasn't convinced. A slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. "How fascinating," she mused aloud. "Playing both sides of the field, are we? Trying to use my husband's missteps to climb the political ladder?" The accusation hit Albert like a freight train, leaving him momentarily speechless. For the remainder of their meeting, Mrs. Rabbit maintained an air of quiet dominance, probing Albert with subtle jabs while revealing nothing of her own intentions. By the time they parted ways, Albert knew he had underestimated her, and possibly overplayed his hand. As he walked away, Mrs. Rabbit watched him leave, her mind already spinning with plans to turn his ambition against him. The storm finally broke when the secret recording was leaked to the press, unleashing a media firestorm that shook the foundations of both the hospital and the Rabbit family. The audio file painted an unflinching picture of Mr. Rabbit's predatory behavior, but it also exposed darker truths about corruption within the healthcare system. Kickbacks, nepotism, and cover-ups involving high-profile figures like Jonathan Abowski. Headlines screamed with accusations, turning public opinion into a volatile battleground. For Mrs. Rabbit, this was more than a scandal. It was an all-out assault on her family's legacy. With reporters camped outside their estate and social media ablaze with outrage, Mrs. Rabbit took center stage in damage control. Dressed impeccably as always, she addressed the press with steely composure, vowing to clear her husband's name while subtly shifting blame onto Albert. "This is not just an attack on my husband, it's an attempt to undermine everything we've built," she declared, her voice laced with defiance. Privately, however, she summoned Albert under the guise of negotiation. "Retract your claims," she demanded, her tone icy yet desperate. "Or face the consequences." Albert refused, standing firm despite knowing the risk. "I won't back down," he said, his jaw clenched. "Not when so many lives are at stake." His decision ignited a legal war, with Mrs. Rabbit filing defamation lawsuits and threatening to expose Albert's supposed ties to Abowski. Meanwhile, the hospital teetered on the brink of collapse as donors withdrew support and staff morale plummeted. Every move became a gamble, every word a potential weapon. Caught in the crossfire, Albert realized there was no turning back. The truth had been set free, but at what cost? The story's conclusion was far from triumphant, leaving Albert caught in the tangled web he had helped unravel. Though the truth about Mr. Rabbit's misconduct had been exposed, thanks to the damning audio recording, Albert paid a steep price for his defiance. As retribution, Donald Wright transferred him to night shifts for 3 consecutive years, effectively isolating him from the hospital's core operations. The decision wasn't just punitive, it was symbolic, a message to anyone daring enough to challenge the status quo. But the real blow came not from the administration, but from Mrs. Rabbit herself. In their final encounter, she cornered Albert after hours in an empty corridor, her expression unreadable yet charged with intensity. "You're clever," she admitted grudgingly, her voice low and deliberate. "I underestimated you, Dr. Abowski." For a moment, Albert allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction, believing he'd earned her begrudging respect. But then her tone shifted. Colder and more menacing. "Cleverness alone won't save you," she warned. "Don't mistake this victory for immunity. Play these games again and you'll find yourself buried deeper than you can imagine." Her words lingered long after she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Albert standing alone amidst the sterile silence of the hospital halls. Despite exposing corruption, he realized that justice in this world came at a cost, one measured not just in sacrifices but in survival. Had he truly won? Or merely delayed the inevitable reckoning? As he walked away, the weight of uncertainty settled heavily on his shoulders, casting doubt over whether integrity could ever truly prevail against entrenched power. The story of Mr. Rabbit's misconduct and the systemic corruption in the healthcare system is not just a tale of one man's abuse of power. It is a microcosm of a society riddled with injustice. The hospital, once seen as a sanctuary of healing, becomes a battleground where privilege trumps morality and truth is buried beneath layers of manipulation. Albert's relentless pursuit of justice highlights the cost of standing up to evil. He sacrificed his reputation, his career trajectory, and even his peace of mind, all to expose the dark underbelly of an institution teetering on the edge of collapse. Yet despite his courage, the outcome was far from fair. Albert's journey underscores a harsh reality. Fighting for what is right often demands personal sacrifice, but it does not guarantee victory. Mrs. Rabbit's chilling warning, "Don't play these games with me," lingers as a reminder that power, when concentrated in the wrong hands, can crush even the most valiant efforts. For every Albert willing to risk everything, there are countless others silenced by fear or complicity. Miss Palmer's trembling voice during her confrontation with Mr. Rabbit symbolizes the countless victims who endure harassment but remain unheard. Their stories, like hers, are often dismissed unless they align with the interests of those in power. In the end, the narrative leaves us with an unsettling question. Is it worth sacrificing oneself for a cause when the world seems unwilling to change? Albert's 3-year night shift sentence stands as both punishment and testament to his bravery. It serves as a grim metaphor for how society rewards, or rather punishes, those who dare to challenge its deeply entrenched inequalities. The fight against abuse and corruption is noble, yet the scars it leaves behind are permanent, reminding us that justice is rarely blind and fairness is often an illusion. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.